Hello and welcome to Catholic Answers Live. We've got a kind of a special treat for you for Thursday. We'll do open forum next hour with Jimmy Akin. This hour, will we talk about what shall we call it? Well, toxic femininity, that's what we're going to call it. Certainly for most of the history of the world, motherhood was not thought to be the enemy of womanhood, but in recent decades that has changed. To be fully a woman in the eyes of much of the modern world, one must be protected against motherhood, separated from it, even where motherhood is accepted. It's not allowed to crowd out the really important things in life, like personal satisfaction. The child, no longer the crown of womanhood, is an obstacle to it. And in such a world, Mary, the Mother of God, is no longer the model of womanhood. She's only kind of a pathetic figure. Femininity, as the world now proposes it, is toxic in many ways to children, to marriages, to society. It has become a kind of selfish self-love. And here to help us understand that and maybe give us the antidote is Dr. Carrie Gress, a doctor of philosophy from Catholic University of America. She's the author of Nudging Conversions, a practical guide to bringing those you love back to the church, Ultimate Makeover, the transforming power of motherhood, and the very popular The Marian Option, God's Solution to a Civilization in Crisis. And she's got a bunch of other books. It's too many to list here, but the newest one is The Anti-Mary, Exposed, Rescuing Culture from Toxic Femininity. Dr. Carrie Gress, thank you for coming in studio today.
Thank you. My pleasure to be here.
I've always enjoyed chatting with you, but it's especially nice to get to actually meet you in person.
It is amazing how finally, after all these years.
I know, it's weird. I always find it weird that when you have Skype, we've met over Skype, so it's almost the same thing, but still not
quite there. Yeah.
I obviously writing a book called The Anti-Mary Exposed, Rescuing the Culture from Toxic Femininity. You are trying to become popular and have lots of friends everywhere.
Very popular. Yeah.
Maybe help us. Well, first of all, what do you mean by anti-Mary? We're familiar, of course, with the term Antichrist.
Sure.
Anti-Mary means what?
Well, the anti-Mary idea came to me when I was writing The Marian Option, and I think I was first struck by thinking about who Our Lady was and all this role that she's played throughout history, and then to see how, in what way she's so disregarded in our own culture. It's almost laughable to suggest that women should follow her as a model of femininity.
Right.
And so that was certainly the first thing. But then the second thing that really struck me was even just when you hear about Adam and Eve, you hear Mary's the new Eve, Christ is the new Adam, but there was always female-male complementarity, but I realized there was no female complement to the Antichrist. But the more that I started looking at the culture and the way that trends were going, particularly from the 1960s onward, it was really clear to me that it was women that were being attacked, and that was really a focus of the culture in terms of trying to take women away from the church. So that's really where the idea came from. So we're not talking about the anti-Mary as a particular individual, but more as a spirit, the way St. John talks about the spirit of an Antichrist.
Right.
So in that respect.
And maybe a recurring theme, like with the Antichrist. You would say, well, there's certainly been Antichrist figures throughout history. And so anti-Mary, well, you wouldn't want to say that one right over there, but you can say that this is a recurring pattern.
We have people probably in mind that we could point to, I think, in the culture, but no,
Wait, this could be a really exciting show. You're going to name names.
I'm not naming names.
Oh, okay.
People have the names already, I think, but no, I think it's more just a specific way in which women have been targeted, and I think if we look at culture, we look at the history of the universe, really, we've never experienced something like what we're seeing today on this massive scale, where we're told that actually our children are the obstacle to our success. Women have never looked at their children that way. Yes, of course, abortion and all these other things existed, but not on the massive scale that we see now, where it's 3,000 abortions a day in our own country, where it's actually celebrated and as something good to make your children the enemy, and that's just something completely historically anomalous. And I think everything flows out of that. All this destruction that we're seeing in the culture, and even this notion of toxic femininity, comes from that, because we've really turned the vices of women into virtues in our culture. So that's, I think,
indeed
how to frame it.
Okay, so maybe part of toxic femininity is the creation of the phrase toxic masculinity. I'm not sure.
No,
is that what you're kind of hinting at? Is that this is a tool of a kind of toxic thing itself?
Right. No, absolutely. Because one of the things that's fascinating about this dynamic, and I spent a lot of time even looking at fairy tales and sort of who's the protagonist, who's the antagonist in fairy tales. And, in our own culture, it's, in a fairy tale, you always see sort of there's the wicked witch, or the older woman who feels like her power is going to be usurped by someone who's younger and, an upstart that's more beautiful. Mm-hmm. And so we don't see that pattern in our own culture necessarily. What we see is women who really want to just be like men, who are striving to be like men, but at the same time, they don't want men to be men. So it's this really weird dichotomy where you see women saying, we want to be like you, we can be better than you, we can beat you in everything.
Right.
But you have to change because what you're doing is toxic. So it's this odd dynamic that's going on between men and women at this stage. But at the heart of it, too, is it's, ironically, women think that they are trying to become like men, but at the same time, and are mimicking that, but at the same time, they're trying to sort of elevate womanhood. So there's a lot of
mixed messages
and unclarity about it.
Right.
And and obviously a lot of it starts back in the 60s. And
well, a pure lie is not very appealing. A lie mixed with truths. And it's certainly true that there's something about women that wants to be heroic, and that and you think of I don't remember the writer. I think it was maybe Saint Bernard of Clairvaux saying, when Mary is kind of given this is what you're being offered, you just have to say yes, and then the whole world can be saved. This image of all the angels and saints gathered around just waiting for Mary's yes. And so you have this idea of, but it's a natural thing for a woman to want to be heroic in self-giving, but so you don't. I suppose what I'm trying to say is this toxic femininity doesn't do away with that, but then it exaggerates it or distorts it into a manly kind of heroism. So it's a twisting of the truth.
Yeah, I would actually say I don't know that I would characterize it as heroism. I think it would be more just this deep desire to do good, to bring good to to bring the good to other people's lives, and you can see this very clearly in even the women's movement. I mean, there's Phyllis Chesler's a feminist who's written a new book called The Politically Incorrect Guide to Feminism. And in it, she just goes on list after list of describing all the things that they thought they were doing that were great for women, taking them to get abortions and, all kinds of things. And so you can see that desire is very deep in the heart of women. It just becomes distorted because, of course, it's a neo-paganism rather than actually being cultivated and formed through Christianity and the proper ordering of self-gift and all of those kinds of things. So, and I think there's a lot of confusion too about this because, of course, as Aristotle pointed out, our minds love to go from one extreme to the other. So we think about feminism on one hand, but most of us, we think, well, what's the alternative? We think, well, it's doormathood. And I think that's one of the struggles, especially among Catholic women. I know myself, you feel like maybe I shouldn't be critical of this because I received so many great things in my life because of feminism.
Yes.
And yet at the same time, because it's a distortion, again, back to your point about there being all this little bit of a lie mixed into it. And so we aren't really getting a true sense of what ordered femininity is. We're just seeing sort of these extremes of either, the radical feminism or on one hand or doormathood on the other. And I think that's the real task at hand, especially with this book, is to try and where's the middle of that? How do we help understand it in a way that's healthy and life-giving, and ultimately will make us happy?
Certainly, the mixing of the feminist revolution with we may have talked about this before. I probably maybe even learned a lot of this from you, but with the mixing of the feminist revolution with the sexual revolution, the idea that liberation meant not just a woman should be paid the same if she works the same for a man, which has actually always been a principle of justice. But but that somehow sexual liberation for women was at the very heart of this.
Right. Well, and again, it comes back to that idea of we want to do everything that men do, even if they're not well-behaved men. We want this kind of freedom and this kind of capacity, whether it's work or sex life or whatever. And I think that's been obviously kind of our undoing, because this is not where human flourishing happens. This is not where authentic womanhood happens. And it's been deeply problematic for the last 50 years.
And it's even hard to talk about now, because it actually is everywhere. This toxic femininity, like it is. There are probably, the majority of the college professors in the United States, were they to hear what you and I are discussing right now, would see us as somehow backwards or out of touch, or maybe even afraid of real womanhood.
Right, and the ironic thing, of course, is that are we seeing that women are actually happier? Has feminism made women happier? And of course, the answer is no. If you look at any kind of statistics about what I call happiness metrics, things like substance abuse, depression, suicide, divorce, all of these things are really pointing to women who are certainly not happier, probably more medicated than anything. That seems to be kind of the overriding reality that I think people are sort of sweeping under the carpet, because they think all of these things have been so great for women, and yet women are not happy with this. So I think that's the real crux, and I think it's a real opportunity for us to help women understand there's a reason why you're so unhappy, and it's partially because human nature can't be changed. And I think that's another big lie that we have been sold, that we can change human nature and women can do whatever they want and still end up peaceful, joyful, and flourishing, and that's just not the case.
Dr. Carrie Gress is our guest this hour. The Anti-Mary Exposed: Rescuing the Culture from Toxic Femininity is her brand new book. Your questions are welcome. I haven't given out the number yet. Wanted to find out what this Anti-Mary is all about before we did that. 888-318-7884 is the number. Your call is welcome, whether you'd like to challenge us on what we were discussing, or whether you'd have a friendlier question for Dr. Gress. 888-318-7884. Take a quick break. Be right back with more right after this on Catholic Answers Live.
Every question is important. Ask yours today on Catholic Answers Live.
Homeschool Connections, an online provider of courses for your Catholic homeschool, is a sponsor of Catholic Answers Live. Homeschool Connections website is homeschoolconnections.com.
Catholic Answers Live is brought to you in part by CatholicSingles.com, the website for Catholics who want to meet others who share their faith and values for faith, fellowship, and love. You can learn more at CatholicSingles.com. Catholic Answers Live thanks CatholicSingles.com for their generous support.
EWTN, communicating the faith.
Just turned 31. Feel that I'm being called to the priesthood, and I've been attending daily mass and just finding that falling more in love with Jesus every day, and finding more opportunities to make sacrifices for him myself, and just allow him to enter me more. How do we fully surrender to God and to his will so that we can more clearly hear his calling?
EWTN. Live truth. Live Catholic.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. God has a plan of love for every man and woman on this planet. If we'll listen, if we're willing to listen. Dr. Carrie Gress, maybe a year and a half ago, I can't remember the timing of it, or brought us a wonderful book called The Marian Option, about maybe listening to what Mary was saying as a guide for working our way through the miseries of the modern world. And now brings us this new book, The Anti-Mary Exposed: Rescuing the Culture from Toxic Femininity. Again, your calls are welcome, 888-318-7884. Something that strikes me in the book and in what you say is that this is actually this very warped idea of womanhood that has been sold and now makes millions and millions of people miserable. It was actually sold. It wasn't like this was a quite conscious decision of people who knew how to do marketing, of people who knew. So can you just give us a little bit of that story?
Yeah. Well, back in the 1960s, you've got someone like Kate Millett, who ended up writing the book Sexual Politics, and a bunch of her friends in New York. You've got Betty Friedan, Gloria Steinem, all kinds of women who were sort of the grandmothers of radical feminism. And basically, they cropped up around the same time that TV was really being used as a means to influence people. And so as a result, what ended up happening was that they were able to take their message far beyond what anybody anticipated at that point. They were also able to create women's studies programs, those we see certainly throughout the country, and certainly were founded by someone like Kate Millett. And so, yeah, I think that their message and the medium of television just work simultaneously to sort of carry this message that this is really what we're ultimately going to make women happy. And again, as we mentioned before, it obviously hasn't, but it was also based on a lot of misconceptions about womanhood, even everything from Germaine Greer talking about how, children can raise themselves. We don't need women to do that. A lot of things that, at this point we're seeing just the fallout from those really bad ideas. And so it's just proliferated in a way that I don't think anybody at that stage even dreamed it could have.
Right.
And you even have, Kate Millett, there were 12 women that was no accidental number, but they were very much involved in Marxism and in the occult, and they felt like this was their sort of evangelical project to carry this message out to women that they needed to have careers, they needed to basically glorify women even above men. That was sort of the pinnacle of existence in their mind. And again, the children were really the obstacle to that women had to show that they were tough by being able to kill their own children because men could kill other men as soldiers. So there was all these very twisted ideas that were behind this that I think a lot of us that have grown up during this phase never heard about because it just wasn't talked about very much.
And young women growing up now don't know this story. They don't know. They don't. They're simply thrust into a world where these ideas are everywhere.
Right.
It's like being born into the poison.
Yeah, and there's nothing out there really to stop it. I mean, that's sort of this sad and scary part. I think even just ironically looking at where is it that women got this idea that they were equal to men. I mean, this doesn't exist really in other cultures, civilizations, religions. This is something very unique to Catholicism. Certainly started with Christ, and we see this in Scripture.
Right.
But the fullness of it really came through understanding who the Blessed Virgin Mary was, and that's really the flourishing that happened. And so, there's so much, people are so critical of the Catholic Church and think the Church has been backward on this. But if you want to look at some powerful women, look at Our Lady and look at all of these female saints who have done remarkable things. I mean, compared to even what we would consider successful in our own culture today. I mean, someone like Catherine of Siena blows any of that out of the water. Right. And so there's something really essential to understanding that connection with the Church and understanding the importance of womanhood and flourishing in that.
I don't think you even have to go to Catherine of Siena. I mean, she's one of the greats of history, but the average, say, Italian mom of the 14th century was the virtue in that woman and what she brought into the world is remarkable compared to what is being asked of women today.
Yeah, even Elizabeth Ann Seton. I mean, she only lived till 46, and yet she founded the first orphanages. She founded the first schools in the United States, and by the time she died, she had 20 houses of nuns, and just completely proliferated through her work. And by the age of 46, she did all of these things. She obviously became the first U.S.-born saint as well.
Well, I know this call will come, so I'm going to give it to you before it comes so you can deal with it now. And I know there are lots of people that want to talk to you, and I'm going to those, but look, Dr. Gress, you just want women to go back to the 1950s.
Please don't go
Have you ever heard that before? Has anyone ever said, look, you're just trying to send women back to the 50s?
Yeah. No, and my argument is if the 1950s were so great, the 1960s never would have happened. So anyway.
Well put.
Thank you. So let's not go back there.
Okay. All right. So you don't want women to be trapped at home with their appliances and their children. Okay.
No 1950s.
Okay. Let's. Shall we go to calls then?
Sure.
All right. Destiny in Baltimore, Maryland, listening on the Catholic Answers Live app. Destiny, thank you for downloading the app onto your phone. Your question for Dr. Carrie Gress.
Okay. My question is a two-parter. Number one is, what is wrong with the idea of women having leadership roles? Because I'm a Catholic woman, but I also consider myself a Catholic feminist. I'm against abortion and stuff like that, but I do believe not only that they're equal, but that women should have more leadership roles.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And then my second part was, a lot of the Catholics in, sermons and stuff talk about giving till it hurts. And I feel like it perpetuates women becoming rescuers and over-sacrificing. So how much giving is too much? So I'm sorry it's a two-parter. But.
No, that's great, Destiny. Thank you.
Thanks,
You got both
Destiny.
parts?
I hope so. You'll have to help me if I forget one.
Okay.
But the first thing I would say is I think we have a real issue in the culture with just even the word feminism. I think it means so many different things to so many different people that to even really pinpoint what you mean by that is confusing. So I would suggest that I'm not in any way saying that women shouldn't be leaders, that women shouldn't work, that women shouldn't be using their gifts. I mean, if I thought that, I certainly wouldn't be sitting here, out 3,000 miles away from my own family. But I think that the reality, and this is, I think that there's something of this issue of that I'm sensing in your question of the women that I'm suggesting that women should be doormats. And maybe that's not what you mean at all. But again, I think that we have to first of all be clear about what we mean by feminism. I don't like the word because I think it has so many different meanings, and I think it means so many different, to each person kind of understands it in their own respect. But if you look actually at what the early radical feminists wanted, and in my book I have a whole chapter on it and just really lay it out, how so many disorders in it. It's almost a little scary because it's almost like saying, why don't we rehabilitate the word mafia? There's so much loaded in what they originally meant by feminism that it's very hard to sort of break from that. So if you want to call yourself a Catholic feminist, that's great. I don't have an issue with that. I just think you need to be clear about how you're using it, and of course being pro-life. But then of course you add all these definitions onto it or all these qualifiers, then it's like, well, why don't you just call yourself Catholic? It might make it an easier conversation. So I think that's part of the issue, is just even defining our terms and figuring out how do we deal with this. As far as the issue about giving till it hurts, I think that this can be a difficult one because obviously, we all need spiritual directors, we all need guidance, we all need the sacraments, we all need things to guide us and lead us to the will of God. And I think that's ultimately going to be the recipe for all of us. But I do believe, and we see it in the saints, that we're all called to suffer the way that Christ suffered. We're all called to that model. And it's not meant just for women, it's meant for all of us. It's certainly meant for men to make tremendous sacrifices in their own lives as well. And we know that those sacrifices are not fruitless, but in fact actually change our character, make us more humble. I mean, there's so many amazing fruits that come from that. So in any event, I hope that kind of answers your question, but it just comes back to, proper discernment and prudence instead of, making yourself a slave, I think.
Destiny, how does that strike you?
It strikes me pretty good. I'm a compulsive giver. I wasn't trying to say that that she was saying that they were doing that. I was just trying to give understanding.
Right.
And then the third question I wish I could have asked, I just thought of it, was what about people, is there any possibilities for people who are asexual or other sexual identities to welcome in the Catholic Church? Because I don't have sexual attraction, so that's one thing.
Right.
Man, I wish you could have asked that question too. That's a really good question. Man. All right, thanks, Destiny. No, what? I'm just teasing. Since she asked it, you can go ahead.
Let's address that.
Yeah.
I think this is one of the really difficult issues that we're dealing with our culture today, because the culture wants to make it a given fact that we can change our genders. But if you look at our bodies, there are, something like 3,000 different genetic codes for a female that differ from a male. And, everything from, my elbows are bent, yours are, if you hold your arms out, it's going to be straight. Because I'm meant to hold baby, you're not meant to hold a baby. There's
I
just
like
tiny,
holding babies.
Well, yeah, but it probably hurts your arms a little bit more than
That's
it
so
does
interesting.
mine.
I never knew that.
I have a bend and you don't have one.
Huh.
So it's, our hips, all of these kinds of things are, even on a structural level, all those realities are there. So I think that the bigger issue is to even just ask the question, why are we seeing so much confusion about gender differences? We haven't seen this in the past, and of course the church is 2,000 years old. We've seen everything, but this is something that is a real issue of our own age, and I think some of it has a lot to do with the fact that the breakdown in the family, people didn't get the love that they needed from their mother. They didn't get their love from the father that they needed, and we see this very clearly in the lives of the radical feminists, that there were so many mother issues there that were this is what kind of led them off on the wrong path to begin with. So I think we need to be firm in the belief that God did create us male and female, and we've got to start from there, and instead of sort of masking these issues, get down to the heart of the problem.
That's such an interesting, masking the issues by deflecting it into other things instead of getting to... People aren't getting what they need at home in a family. Yep. The Anti-Mary Exposed, Rescuing the Culture from Toxic Femininity. That is the title of Dr. Carrie Gress's brand new book. She is our guest this hour, and you are welcome to call 888-318-7884.
Hello, this is Archbishop Alexander Sample of the Archdiocese of Portland in Oregon. Keep that dial right here on Catholic Answers Live.
Author Mark McNeil spent years in the Oneness Pentecostal movement, praying in its lively services, zealously spreading its unconventional teachings, and rejecting mainstream Christianity as misguided. Then he left it all behind. All in the Name is the story of a man who believed he was among an elite group of believers who followed the true faith when so many others had strayed. But an inquisitive mind, careful study, and the action of the Holy Spirit finally led Mark out of Oneness Pentecostalism and into the Catholic Church. This is an inspiring conversion story you won't want to miss. It's a faith strengthener for Catholics and an intriguing challenge to those who deny the doctrine of the Trinity. Order your copy of All in the Name today by calling 1-888-291-8000, logging on to the shop at Catholic.com, or asking for it at a good Catholic bookstore near you.
Love and beauty. As a little girl, Dawn Eden Goldstein knew that she wanted those things, that in them somehow she would find God. Over the years as a rock journalist, she moved among some of popular music's best-known artists, straining to capture that transcendent love and beauty in every note and lyric. In Sunday Will Never Be the Same, Dawn recounts her spiritual journey in beautifully wrought detail, mixing powerful accounts of trauma, healing, and epiphany with funny anecdotes from inside the music scene. It is the rare conversion story that delights as it inspires, amuses as it edifies, and ultimately lays before the reader a lived testimony to the transforming grace of Christ. Order your copy of Sunday Will Never Be the Same by calling 1-888-291-8000, visiting the shop at Catholic.com, or asking for it at a good Catholic bookstore near you.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. Dr. Carrie Gress is our guest this hour. It feels like a long time since you've been on the show. Is that me, or has that been a long time?
Yes, yeah.
That's a failing on our part. Unless you've been avoiding us, in which case...
No, I just thought it was Jimmy Aiken that I...
Mad at you?
Yeah, that you got mad at me that I let the cat out of the bag about his birthday, so...
Wait,
or his anniversary or something. I don't remember what it was. You had a cake for him.
I forgot that whole thing. Yeah, we had a cake for Jimmy on his 25th anniversary, I think. Here.
Yeah, that sounds right.
And then you said there's a cake for Jimmy, and before he came on.
Yeah.
And so that's why. That is. I need to reassure you that is not why. It's entirely an internal problem of scheduling.
I didn't actually really think that was the case, but nevertheless, that's great.
Well, if we just say we'll have you on every time you write a book, will you write more books?
I got more coming.
Oh, good. That's very good.
This fall.
Because the Marian Option. Fantastic book. Now then you did the one on Marian consecration for children, and then now we've got the Anti-Mary Exposed, Rescuing the Culture from Toxic Femininity. Pretty soon you'll have us all straightened out if you keep writing.
Well, I'm running out of gas, actually. There can't be too many more.
Yeah, right. Okay, let's go to Maria in New Jersey, listening on EWTN Radio. You are up next with Dr. Carrie Gress. Your question, please.
Hi. First, I I want to tell you we have a whole bunch of children making their consecration on the Annunciation, so thank you for that beautiful book.
Oh, that's so great. Thank you, Maria. That's great.
Yeah. So, secondly, just this question, I have 7 children and I homeschool and have been married 32 years, and I just find that, the most beautiful thing we can do as mothers is the formation of souls, and that's what God will look at. And I think we've lost that in our culture, and I just wonder why you think priests and bishops don't even speak about that. I mean, as a mother, that is your number one job.
Yeah.
And we never hear it. So, if nobody ever tells another woman that, how are they to learn that?
Yeah. No, I think that's a great question. I think that the hard thing is that I think priests and bishops have been pretty beat up by women in general in terms of, we all know the angry woman that goes in to the priest who doesn't like the way his homily or something, and then it reports to the bishop and whatnot. So I don't want to say that they don't have courage, but the fact remains is that we've had like 50 years of women marching into places and demanding that things be changed. And I think that's part of the problem. The second reality, of course, is that, and you can see this across the board among men and women, men don't like to fight women. Look at Adam before the fall. He didn't want to say no to Eve. It was just the way it was. Like, here's some fruit. All right, I'll take it. So I think that that's another struggle. But I think the real issue when it comes down to this vocation of wife and mother, I think that women have to pick up a lot of slack and start promoting it and start talking about how how fulfilling it is and how life-giving it is and how transforming it is. I think that's part of our vocation that we can carry on and we can witness to in a way that certainly a priest or a bishop never could. I will say the one thing that I think would help tremendously is if we did start focusing also, certainly among women, but also even in confessional, about the issue of envy and jealousy and that role that it plays for women, because I think it's a very unique kind of sin. Women always want more. You see this with Eve, he said there's more that we could have. And this is kind of a constant underlying current of women's issues. And so I think this is something that we need to also bring out more in spiritual direction and just be mindful of it, because it's incredibly corrosive. And I think that's behind a lot of what is motivating us is all this comparison that goes on among women that we try to kind of sweep under the carpet. But it's certainly there in terms of issues that we're having in the church.
Okay, Maria?
Thank you so much. Yep, God bless you.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that call. I wonder if priests preach those things, how many people would listen to them, too. I don't know.
Yeah.
We got you for that.
Oh.
Do you know what I mean?
Read the book, yeah. I'm not going to be preaching from the pulpit anytime soon.
No, I don't mean preaching from the pulpit, but I think that women talking to women is somehow, especially about things like that, is more effective.
And I think that's been part of our struggle. If you see what's happened with feminism, it's just kind of come in and bowled over everything. There's been no line of defense against it to sort of hold back what happened in the 60s. And this is why we have so much of our academics, fashion, politics, Hollywood, pop music, all of it is completely monopolized by this idea that abortion is necessary in order for a woman to be successful. And I think this is part of the problem is we've just sort of sat back passively and think someone else should take care of this. Maybe the priest or maybe the bishop should take care of it. Wouldn't that be great? But women need to hear it from other women, and I think that's the power that feminism has shown and the media has shown is that other women are sort of dictating to us what we need to think. But as Catholics, we need to push back against that as well.
Yeah, and it does seem like that's happening. I feel like there are very, like I'm thinking of Helen Alvarez or yourself or many of the women on Catholic radio. Yeah. There are more voices of Catholic women saying, no, there is a gospel, and here's how it will fulfill you.
Yeah.
Let's go to Olafine, I assume. I hope I pronounced that correctly, in Fairview Heights, Illinois. Olafine, you are on with Dr. Carrie Gress. Your question, please.
Hi there. Yeah, you got the pronunciation right. Thank you. So I'm very happy to be hearing this discussion, and I would like to hear more of it everywhere. So I think a major component of what is going on, at least with my generation, so I'm 34, and the clock is certainly ticking. I'm very aware, and I feel the pressure. But I spent the greater part of it. It took me till I was 31 to find a man that was like somewhat malleable into a grown man, because my generation is full of, a lot of, and it's a lot of it isn't their own fault, or at least it was more conditioning than anything. Very infantile men, and I feel like the women are running into this problem. The women are my age, and I was pretty selective. I mean, I'm looking around and I feel for a lot of what the women have to put up with. I do feel lucky and very fortunate. And my husband is the first to admit it, and he's a big fan of Jordan Peterson. He's at the age of 33 now, just finally starting to grasp what it means to be a man and what the masculine role is.
There's no question, Olafine, that there is this well, I don't know if it's infantilization or if it's perpetual adolescence among men. Right. Did you want to comment on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think what you are asking is just like the weed on top of this whole root system of the whole culture. And, one of the things that I think is really important that women understand is that we are the soil of the culture. If women go wrong, like every gardener knows, if you got bad soil, nothing's going to grow. And Satan knows this. This is why he's come after us in such a purposeful way, because if you get the women, everybody else is going. There's this great Mae West quote, something to the effect of, wherever women go, men will go right after them. And I think that's very true in the sense that women have forgotten who they are. Women are very confused about who they are and what it is they're supposed to be doing today, and what it is that's ultimately going to make them happy and bring them, flourishing relationships and healthy marriages and children. But because of the fact that we've had women so disordered for so long, men don't know how to react either. And women have had very low expectations of men because, again, they're trying to act like really bad men, bad boys. They want sex without consequences. They want any kind of job. It's basically kind of a whole package of selfishness that we see in men, and women have tried to mimic this because they thought that it looked appealing and would help them. So in any event, it's an incredibly difficult problem, but I think the issue is we have to get back to women being women, and then from there the family can go back to growing the way that it ought to.
Olafine, thank you very, very much. I hope that was helpful. I also think, Dr. Gress, if I may add from a man's perspective, if you say this man goes to college and men are in many and various ways told you're superfluous, you're not needed, right, they're going to behave like they're superfluous and not needed. Right. They're going to say, okay, I'll go home and play video games. Yeah. And then you get women a few years later going, well, where's all the men? Well, you told them they're superfluous and not needed. Yeah.
No, I think that's an absolutely great point. I'm glad you brought that up.
The Anti-Mary Exposed, Rescuing the Culture from Toxic Femininity. Dr. Carrie Gress is our guest, and you are welcome to call 888-31-TRUTH. Take a quick break. Be right back with more right after this.
We're here for you. Call now. Catholic Answers Live.
Underwriting for Catholic Answers Live is provided by Real Estate for Life. Real Estate for Life connects homebuyers and sellers to real estate agents while supporting pro-life organizations. On the web at realestateforlife.org.
The wisdom of Mother Angelica.
Don't you feel sometimes like there's so many people in the world? How does he hear your prayer? Never think of that, huh? Everybody thinks that. I'm only a little grain of sand on the seashore. Oh, but that's not true. See, God is God. And you and I have to let God be God. I don't know how he does it. He's God.
For more information on Mother Angelica, visit Religious Catalog at EWTNRC.com.
Do you love praying for people? Have you ever wanted to use your gift of prayer to share Jesus with others and build up the body of Christ? Start a public prayer station with St. Paul Street Evangelization. Listen to people's needs, pray with them, or invite them to meet you at church. St. Paul Street Evangelization can help you get started. Find out how at streetevangelization.com. That's streetevangelization.com.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. We're talking with Dr. Carrie Gress about her brand new book, The Anti-Mary Exposed, Rescuing the Culture from Toxic Femininity. And in my experience, if you get a book from Dr. Gress, you're not going to be disappointed. I'm not going to pretend that I read the one that you and George Weigel did. But all the ones that I have read.
When you go to Poland, you can read it.
On my next trip to Poland, I'm going to do, yes, because it's about the sacred places in Poland from Pope John Paul II.
Right, all those places that helped form him as the man that he became to be Pope.
So I don't know why I had to admit that to you, that I hadn't read it, but
it's
all the ones I have read.
I forgive you.
That makes me feel good. Thanks. I want to take a minute to talk with our good friend, Rochelle Lucero, who is director of social media here at Catholic Answers and a theologian in her own right, and the podcaster behind the podcast Clumsy Theosis. Hello, Rochelle.
Hey, Cy.
Okay, so here I'm looking at this. Love languages and intimacy with God. First of all, I'm all about the love languages.
The love languages, yeah.
Very helpful. But are you over-promising with this intimacy with God thing? All right, so you talk about intimacy with God. Is that poetic language, or is that actually a thing that people can have?
Right. Now, by asking that question, you're totally opening a can of worms. But yes, to answer your question, yes, you can. And I want to ask you a question. Are you familiar with the Lord saying that I am the vine and you are the branches?
I am familiar with that.
Okay, what does he say before that?
Wait. That's
a lot of us forget. So right before he says that,
Tim Staples wouldn't forget.
He says, abide in me and I in you, right? And then right after that, he says, because you have to abide in me in order to bear fruit, right?
Yes.
And that's what we're all called to bear fruit. And the way that looks in our life is to live a life of holiness and to become who God created us to be in that holiness, giving our gifts to the world. And so we have to have intimacy with God in order to bear fruit in this world.
I see.
Yes.
Yeah, if we're disconnected from him, then what do we got?
Exactly
We're just a
what
dead
he
branch.
says. Yeah.
All right, you did it again, Rochelle Lucero. So I got to hear the new Exodus in the Gospel of John. Actually, I heard a little bit of that one, but I haven't heard it all the way. And then you've also got, I'm just doing the most recent ones, Theosis and Inheriting the Kingdom.
Mm-hmm.
We Bring the Light.
Mm-hmm.
Is that the name of a rap song or something? What are we quoting there?
You know what? I don't know what it is, but it's stuck in my head, so it has to be from something.
Yeah.
But if I don't think I'm guilty of any copyright infringement or anything there, but
I am well aware of the fact that you can get Clumsy Theosis anywhere where you can get reputable podcasts.
Yes.
I don't know about the dark web or that,
Me
but
either.
wherever
we're children of light, so we should.
Wherever the forces of good have assembled
Yes.
to make podcasts, you can get Clumsy Theosis, and you should get Clumsy Theosis.
Yes.
It costs how much?
It's for free.
What?
Yes, it's free to anyone who has the internet. So I guess pay for your internet or go to a coffee shop, buy a coffee, use their internet. Listen to it there.
And find out how to become more and more like God, your Father.
Exactly.
Rochelle Lucero, thanks very much.
Yeah, you're welcome.
I always like it when you come by. Clumsy Theosis, as we said, anywhere where you get good podcasts, you can get Clumsy
Amen.
Theosis. Dr. Carrie Gress, you ready to go back to phones, or have we worn you
sure.
out? Really? Oh, you all this energy. John in Huntington Beach, California, listening on the Catholic Answers Live app. John, your question for Dr. Carrie Gress.
Yeah, well, thank you. I guess my question is there's 150 million American women, and it seems that people of the Catholic faith are disappointed in the thoughts of those women and what they're doing with their lives these days. My question is, what specifically are American women doing that is so disappointing to the Catholic faith? And really, why do you have the authority to speak for 150 million American women on this issue?
Excellent questions, John. I'm sure there are no answers forthcoming. Dr. Carrie Gress, hey, how do you answer that?
Thanks for your question, John. I think that the big issue is really the question of abortion. 3,000 abortions daily in this country. And these aren't babies that are being killed by strangers. I mean, this is historically how mass murders happen, with stranger killing stranger. These are parents killing their own children. And there's something diametrically opposed to humanity in that, particularly when you have those kinds of numbers, and when it's accepted as a necessity, actually, for human success. So I think that to answer your question, I think that's the fundamental piece, is to say that our motherhood is an obstacle for us, when in fact it's written right into our bodies. It's written into our souls. There's so many elements of it. So I would say that's the specific fact. But as far as the authority, I'm just an author, but the reality is that you have so many millions of women who are absolutely miserable. Who there's women get to their 50s, 60s, 70s, and they say, "This isn't the life I was promised. This is not what I signed up for. I don't have a husband. I don't have children. This is not what I wanted or saw my life to be like." And I think we have to address that that unhappiness, because it doesn't do them justice. It's not fair to them to say, well, just get over it, when in fact we have actually really slid in some bad directions that have led to a lot of heartache and brokenness among families and whatnot. So my authority comes from the fact that I really want to help bring healing to women and to society. And I think our society is, the fabric of it is really broken down because of this issue of life.
Is that acceptable to you, John?
I just wanted to comment, it does not do the abortion debate any good at all to put this smokescreen of femininity on it. If you're going to argue against abortion, you ought to argue against abortion and not make the argument about something that doesn't have anything to do with abortion. And I don't believe your deal about 60-year-old women are unhappy with their lives. I think a lot of women, especially young women, are really, really happy with the opportunities that they do have now that they didn't have before. And you really didn't answer my question about other than abortion, what specifically are these women doing that is...
Well, there is a little bit of the element of, other than that, Mrs. Lincoln, how was the play in that? I mean, if 50 million abortions, or I don't know, what was the number that you said?
We're at 60 plus.
If you have to say, other than that, what is the problem? And it's also true that Dr. Gress mentioned the great unhappiness of women. And if those two things are not enough, I don't know that you can be satisfied, John, but did you want to address any more of what?
No, I mean, I think that obviously, I have benefits and there are things that I can do and have because of what has happened in the last 50, 60 years. But I don't think that's something that should silence me to speak up about what these other injustices are. And I think this is something that women do by and large because we feel guilty and feel like I shouldn't say anything. I got a PhD in philosophy. I would never have gotten that 60 years ago. 50 years ago. But I think to use that to overlook all of these other issues is not necessarily helpful, and it ultimately will not be helpful to women, period.
John, we'll leave it there. Thank you very, very much for that call. Ray in Colorado, listening on Sirius XM Satellite Radio, Channel 130. That's EWTN. Ray, your question for Dr. Carrie Gress.
Yeah, you guys are always saying how, men don't want to be married and they're not stepping up or whatever. But what about you hear all the time women say, oh, I don't need a man. I just want one. And really, you don't need one for familial love or to help raise your kids. I mean, how are you going to fix that? No decent guy that's good is going to want to marry a woman like that. And that's why, like you said, they're unhappy.
Right.
How are you going to change their attitude?
Okay.
Yeah. No, I think you're right, Ray. This is the real crux of the issue, is just recognizing that women have been sold this lie for so long that ultimately we're going to be happy if we're just career women, if we're self-absorbed, if we can just focus on what our desires and wants are and not recognize that men are fundamental and crucial and vital and actually necessary for our own flourishing, and the children are also vital and important. And so I think what the reality is we've gotten to this place where women are afraid to speak up about that, where we don't want to talk about it because we feel, again, back to this idea of feeling guilty about the opportunities that we have. But we have to address that, again, because women are the soil of society, and families simply can't flourish without good women.
Ray, thank you very much for that. I'm getting the sense, and I want to get this clear from you, are you of the view that there are natural desires within girls who then become women that are those natural desires, they're basically being talked out of them for a large period of their life and then talked into some other thing, like what you really want is this.
Yeah.
Is that your view of what's happening to women?
I think there's a lot of that. I know, from my own experience, I found myself as a 25, 30-year-old woman working in Washington, D.C., and was not happy. Was just, I was doing everything that the culture was telling me I ought to do, what fashion magazines and career, advice columnists, et cetera, et cetera. And that ultimately was not satisfying to me. And it was, I think that's part of the problem is because we were being taught that we have to be aggressive, we have to be assertive. It manifests itself in all kinds of different ways. We have to go for that career, and that's the most important thing. That's really distorting our characters in certain ways, and we're not able to see clearly what it is that the desires of our heart are. But I think that there's something very hopeful, particularly among millennials, because they haven't had to sift through a lot of this junk the way that people of my generation did. And so they're getting back to that point where they're saying, well, what really are the desires of my heart? I'm not trying to compete with men. But we do see this again, this idea of being promoted over and over again that, women have to be stronger than men and that they need to triumph over them. So it's just this balancing act. And because we don't have other voices out there sort of suggesting alternatives to it, that's really the only voice that people are hearing, and they feel like that's the direction that they have to go, is with what the culture is dictating.
So if you were to refer that to Mary, then you would say Mary experienced a great deal of suffering in her life, but would you say that she lived a life that was attentive to the actual desires of her heart?
Yeah, well, on three different levels. First of all, I think there's three basic desires to every human woman, to every woman. I think she desires to be known and loved, and we can see that very clearly in who Our Lady was in her relationship with God the Father. She knew how much she was loved by him. So when a woman knows that, that's already like the first piece of the puzzle. And we get that from our parents. I mean, there's a lot that comes from the family, and that's a key piece. The second piece is, as I mentioned before, this desire to do good, to reach out to others and to offer ourselves to help improve the lives of others. And that can certainly become misguided. And then, of course, there's this reality that we desire to be beautiful. And, we can see that being abused in many different ways for sensuality or for vanity.
Right.
But that desire is fundamentally there in most women. But these are the things we see in spades in Our Lady. I mean, she's every apparition that we've ever heard about of Our Lady, the person says, she's the most beautiful woman in the world. St. Bernadette said, you would want to die just so you could see her again. She was so beautiful. So I think that this is one of the reasons why I'm, the first half of the book is sort of understanding what the Anti-Mary is. The second half of the book is really a look at who Our Lady is and why modeling ourselves after her is in fact the route that will lead to happiness, because all of these desires can be met by her and can be met through the church. And it makes a lot of sense when you start seeing what are the desires of our hearts and how do we meet them. And the church has been way ahead on this for centuries. We just have to remind people about it.
They can't be met just by competing with other people, whether
Absolutely
it's economically or sexually or any other way.
Exactly.
That's not going to do it. No. The Anti-Mary Exposed: Rescuing the Culture from Toxic Femininity is the brand new book from Dr. Carrie Gress. I believe we have time for one more caller, but you're going to have to be quick. I'm sorry, Aaron in Portland, Oregon. Real quick with your question, if you don't mind, for Dr. Gress.
Yes, I'll try to make it as quick as I can. And being that women have receptors in our brain in order to attach to our babies and family and community, the exploitation of women since the 60s to believe that we can just have sex with no consequence. Do you think that by this, 50, 60 years of this, the reason women can so easily abort their babies without a conscience and not realizing the devastating consequences of that decision?
Oh, is being desensitized by this idea of a kind of sex without consequence?
Yeah, well, we're naturally, as women, this is how we were created, is to bond with babies. This would be an unthinkable thing.
Right. Fair enough.
So I'm sorry, do you mean that on like a biological level or just on a psychological level that something's happening to it?
Biologically, obviously.
Okay. Yeah, I think that certainly, sin has that desensitizing reality that is always going to be there. And I think also just the scandal of it, the witness that witness isn't the right word. Negative witness, was there a word for that? We're scandalized by that, but we have become desensitized, and we think that it's just something normal, and it's clearly not.
It does seem systematic, desensitizing, so that we can do horrible things.
Yeah.
And feel okay about it.
Yep.
Dr. Carrie Gress has been our guest. Thank you.
Thank you.
It's very nice to meet you in person.
Yes, likewise.
The book, once again, is The Anti-Mary Exposed, Rescuing the Culture from Toxic Femininity. It is from Tan Books, but you can probably get it anywhere where quality Catholic books are sold. Probably quality books of any kind. It would fit right in there with them. Next hour, Open Forum with Jimmy Akin. Hang around for that. We're happy to take your call. 888-31-TRUTH. Right back with that after this on Catholic Answers Live.
This is Archbishop Salvatore Cordileone of San Francisco. Thank you for listening to Catholic Answers Live.
Why did God employ prophets in Scripture? How can we interpret symbolic biblical prophecies and recognize their fulfillment? What about prophecies from Jesus and Revelation that foretell persecution, calamity, and the end of the world? In 20 Answers Bible Prophecy, you'll find smart, solid answers to these questions and many more, cutting through the confusion and presenting the basic scope of scriptural prophecy in a way that anyone can understand. 20 Answers Bible Prophecy is part of the 20 Answers series from Catholic Answers, offering hard facts, powerful arguments, and clear explanations of the most important topics facing the Church and the world, all in a compact, easy-to-read package. Visit shop.catholic.com today and take a look at this exciting series from Catholic Answers Press.
With the recent commemoration of the 50th anniversary of the release of Humani Vitae, there have been fresh attacks on Catholic teaching from outside and, unfortunately, inside the Church. That's why Catholic Answers thought it critical to provide a vigorous affirmation of Pope Paul VI's prophetic wisdom with our newest book, Inseparable: 5 Perspectives on Sex, Life, and Love in Defense of Humani Vitae. We asked 5 distinguished contributors to reflect on and defend Humani Vitae from 5 perspectives, each of them compelling, together forming a mosaic of truth. Don't be caught uninformed when the topic comes up among friends, family, and co-workers. Order your copy of Inseparable today by calling 1-888-291-8000 or by visiting the shop at Catholic.com.
Wouldn't it be great to have a book to give to anyone to explain exactly why Catholics believe what we believe? The good news is that now there is. Why We're Catholic is the groundbreaking new resource by apologist Trent Horn. That one book you can hand to anyone as a starting point for helping them find their way into, or back to, the practice of the Catholic faith. In a series of short, easy-to-read chapters, Trent covers the whole range of common topics, starting with why we believe in anything at all, and answering all the common objections to the Catholic faith, both doctrinal and moral. Don't miss out on the most important, life-changing book to come along in years. Better yet, it's only $3 a copy when you order in bulk. Order your copies of Why We're Catholic today by calling 1-888-291-8000, visiting the shop at Catholic.com, or asking for it at a good Catholic bookstore near you.
Just like the saints of the Counter-Reformation, our own souls are in constant need of reform, of reconversion to God and His will for us. We struggle with sin. We become distracted in prayer. We find it hard to be loving and easy to be selfish. In Reform Yourself, Sean McAfee shows you how these magnificent saints can be guides to your own personal transformation. We all need to reform our souls. Let the saints who reformed the Church show you how. Order your copy of Reform Yourself today by calling 1-888-291-8000, visiting the shop at Catholic.com, or asking for it at a good Catholic bookstore near you.
In a culture that worships the pursuit of sexual pleasure, the Catholic Church's teaching on contraception can seem archaic and unintelligible. Its critics say it is outdated, theologically unfounded, and even harmful. And even faithful Catholics can have difficulty explaining this moral teaching. Catholic Answers is out to change all that. That's why we've just released Trent Horn's dynamic new DVD, The Case Against Contraception, using scripture, papal and magisterial teaching, natural law, and new insights provided by social science and medicine. Trent put forward a compelling case for Catholic teaching with his trademark charity and persuasive graciousness. Be prepared to give a defense. Order your copy of The Case Against Contraception today by calling 1-888-291-8000, logging onto the shop at Catholic.com, or asking for it at a good Catholic bookstore near you.
Hello and welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. We got open forum for you this hour. That means any question at all about the Catholic faith is welcome from anyone at all. We especially, well, let me just throw it out there. Once again, still have not had a call from a Buddhist person in a long time. So if you're Buddhist, you're welcome to call. If you practice Hindu faith, you're welcome to call. If you're a Christian of any kind, if you're a Catholic, if you're no religion at all, you're welcome to call. That's what open forum means. But it also means that any question at all about the Catholic faith is welcome. 888-318-7884 is the number. 888-318-7884. And I have to say, when our guest this hour is here, we usually are quite liberal in allowing a great variety of questions, including questions of a more generally philosophical or religious nature. And that means that our guest is Jimmy Akin. Hi, Jimmy Akin.
Hey, how you doing?
I am very well, thank you.
So, you said like Buddhist people could call and Hindu people could call and people with no religion could call. What if someone were, say, a pseudoscientific evolutionary pantheist? Could they call?
That would depend. Are they still alive?
Well, I think they'd have to be to call.
Okay, yeah, then they can call, yes.
Okay.
They could. That sounds very familiar, however.
Oh, does it? Okay.
Yes, it does, but I don't want to give any, maybe I'll just let this topic go. That sounds like a very interesting religion to have. But
Not a lot of people have that.
Not a lot of people have that.
Some very famous people have had it.
Not necessarily famous in a good way.
No, infamous people.
Infamous people, yes. But I don't know if I'm supposed to name who that might be.
Name who that might be.
Oh, okay. That might be the religion of Adolf Hitler.
That's correct. Yeah, that was Adolf Hitler's religion.
Yeah. Could you say it again?
He was a pseudoscientific evolutionary pantheist.
Yeah, right. Right. And
how might people find out about that?
They could go to Jimmy Akin's Mysterious World.
Yeah,
that's the current issue.
Current episode.
The current episode of Jimmy Akin's Mysterious World. I didn't know if I was supposed to say that because I didn't know if it would ruin the tease of what is Hitler's religion.
No, I wouldn't bring it up if I had a concern about that.
Well, let me ask you this, Jimmy Akin. Okay. So you got this podcast, Jimmy Akin's Mysterious World, and you got ghosts on there, and you do the Antichrist, you do Bigfoot, you do pretty much any mystery you're willing to tackle.
Lots of mysteries.
When you look at the popularity, like you go, oh, this was a very popular one, this one was not so popular. Where does Hitler's religion fall? Are people
very popular?
People are interested in Hitler's religion.
So, for example, the previous week's episode was on the Phoenix Lights UFO incident, which was the biggest mass UFO sighting in American history, or certainly recent American history. Lots of people saw it. Thousands of people saw it. Took video, pictures, all that stuff, because it happened in the 90s, and it did well. But in one day, the Hitler's religion episode got as many views on YouTube as the previous week's show had gotten in a week.
Yeah. Oh, so people
very popular. That and weight loss, the mystery of weight loss episode were
there's maybe some enlightened self-interest there.
Yeah,
but okay, so
before I put up the weight loss episode, someone saw that it was coming and was like, "How is weight loss a mystery?" It's like you obviously have not struggled with this.
Yeah, right. Okay, so one thing we do know for certain, Hitler baptized the Catholic.
Right.
And sometimes it is implied that he was a Christian himself or a practicing Catholic. But is there any evidence of any of that?
No, he really, he was baptized a Christian and a Catholic, but his mother was a devout Catholic. His father was not. His father was like a free thinker. Oh. And Adolf Hitler took after his father. So by the time he went to be confirmed, he grudgingly went through with it, but according to people who were there, the priest had to drag the words out of him. Oh. And so he was already at a very young age rejecting
Hitler was a surly teen?
Yeah, or even younger. Okay. And then he just abandoned the practice of religion in early adulthood. And even though he would, early on in his political career, he would try to make it sound like he's a Christian, he hated Christianity so much he couldn't even just say, yeah, I'm a Christian. He had to have this bizarre, but I'm a positive Christian.
Yeah.
By which I mean, and then he had this
basically not a Christian.
Not a Christian, yeah.
Yeah, right.
And so he would use Jesus as a symbol of struggle, because he's all about struggle and everything. Mein Kampf is my struggle is his big book.
Yeah.
And so he liked that he could use Jesus as an image of a fighter against Jewish whatever. But then he did not believe that Jesus' death redeemed anybody. He apparently thought Jesus was just a man. Right. He did not think he was resurrected. So his quote unquote positive Christianity meant, according to him, a fighting Christianity that would not hesitate to use the fist and the sword.
Right.
And it's like, okay, that's not really love your neighbor, dude.
No, he missed that. Right, I'm a positive Christian.
Yeah.
It's just cover. You could have the word Christian in there.
Right.
But it's cover for the same thing he believed.
And then when you look at what he really believed, it's like, okay, well, he believed that the universe, nature, is God, so that's why he's a pantheist.
Yeah.
And, he had this whole struggle of the races thing, so that's where evolution fits in.
Yeah.
He thought he was being scientific by having, evolution as a prominent...
But he didn't understand
But he didn't understand the science of evolution, so that's why he's pseudoscientific.
Yeah, and he wasn't a very good painter either. 888-318.
Had trouble with the human form for some reason.
He painted a picture of Mary and the baby Jesus.
No, I haven't seen that one.
It is terrible. It's horrible. It's just so...
Baby Jesus has a sword? And...
No, just baby Jesus is... there's just no beauty in it. No, there's no beauty in it at all. It's a painting, but it's just blank.
I haven't seen that one. I have seen and I've heard art critics talk about how his paintings mostly don't have humans in them.
Right.
He'll do pictures of buildings and landscapes and things like that, but not people.
That's why they told him to go be an architect. That's the advice that he got from the art teachers. Probably the rest of that was, or just go anywhere. Just don't be here. 888-318-7884. Enough conversation about Hitler's religion. It is open forum today on Catholic Answers Live. I would just mention again, though, if you do want to know more about Hitler's religion, Jimmy Akin's Mysterious World is the place to go. Just put that in the Google machine, and it will pop up. Are you ready for questions, Jimmy?
I've been ready. I was born ready.
Okay. Chad in New York, listening on the Catholic Answers Live app. Chad, your question for Jimmy.
Yeah, hi, good afternoon.
Hi.
So, my family just recently moved to New York, and my son is 7 years old. He's going through preparing for First Communion.
Congratulations.
Yeah, thank you. The issue is the diocese or our parish is trying to have the kids sing a song during their First Communion Mass, and there's a line in the song that I find very problematic.
Okay, what's that?
And when I brought it up, What's that?
What's the line?
So it's Peter built his church on the rock of our faith.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So, I mean, Peter didn't build a church. Jesus did. It's not Peter's church. It's Jesus's. Mm-hmm. And Jesus built it on the rock of Peter.
Okay. So what happened when you brought this up?
There was pushback. They said, "Oh, we've been doing this for a very long time, and it's a very standard song."
Mm-hmm. And who did you bring it up with?
The director of religious education.
Okay. So I understand your concern. I would say that the song's line is confusing, and especially for children, it could be confusing given other things that the church says. So it didn't strike me as a great song. And ultimately, the person in charge at the parish level is going to be the pastor. So you could always, if you don't get satisfaction with the DRE, you could always go to the pastor and talk to him about it. You may or may not get him to change it. But if they don't change it, I wouldn't stress about it too much, because even though it is potentially misleading or confusing, it's not false. While if you just think in terms of Matthew 16:18, you have Matthew 16:18. In that verse, Jesus says, "I will build my church on you, Peter, or on this rock, and the gates of hell shall not prevail against it." Well, even in that verse, the church has understood the rock in more than one way. In one way, it refers to Peter, and by extension, his successors, the popes. But it's also always, throughout church history, been understood as a symbol that refers to more than one thing. The fancy term for that is it's a polyvalent symbol. That just means it refers to more than one thing. So one of the things it refers to is clearly Peter, but it also has been seen as referring to additional things like faith in Jesus Christ or the faith or things like that. And in fact, if you look in the Catechism of the Catholic Church today, it interprets the rock two different ways. So this is actually something the church is quite comfortable with. As long as you're not denying that it's Peter, you can see additional meanings in there. Then that leaves us with the question of, can Peter be seen as building the church? Well, in Matthew 16:18, Peter is not the builder of the church. Jesus is the one that image presents us as being the builder of the church. But we have other passages in Scripture. And so, for example, if you look at 1 Corinthians 3, Paul's talking about building churches, and he says, "No man can lay a foundation other than Jesus Christ, but then I, like a master builder, built this construction of the church on the foundation of Jesus Christ." And he talks about other people doing the same thing, other ministers of the gospel being builders of the church. And so if Paul can do that in God's inspired word and conceive of himself as a builder of the church, then certainly Peter could be conceived of as a builder of the church as well. And so so you could say Peter built his church, namely the church that Peter was involved in building. Ultimately, it's Jesus's, but you can speak this way, and he built it on our faith. Well, if we didn't respond to the message of the gospel in faith, then we wouldn't be part of his church, Jesus' church, or the one that Peter helped build. And so you could say there's a sense in which you can envision our faith in Christ as being foundational to our membership in the church, and thus as a foundation of the church, symbolically speaking. So I understand that because of the tension between the way this line is phrased and the way many people, including especially children who are just learning the faith, will understand Matthew 16:18. I understand there's tension there and it can cause confusion, but it's not flatly false. There is a way in which you can understand the song lyric based on how you've described it in an Orthodox Catholic sense. And so if they don't want to change it, I would say it's unfortunate, but it's not the end of the world. And I would just make sure that your own son understands the sense in which it can be understood acceptably.
Chad, I hope that was helpful to you. We got to head to a break. Before we do, I want you to know we've got a free ebook available to anyone who would like it at shop.catholic.com, Making the Most of Lent, a spiritual companion. You just go over to shop.catholic.com. There will be a banner there that says free ebook. Click that and you will get your free copy of Making the Most of Lent, a spiritual companion.
Can a moral relativist object to God's goodness based on the problem of evil? The answer is no, at least when it comes to moral evil, and here's the reason. You see, moral relativism states no moral truths exist independently of the individual. That's to say, what is right and wrong is relative to what the individual determines. Now, how can a relativist deviation from his own moral standard be considered morally evil when there's nothing to oblige him to follow his moral standard? The answer is it can't. But if no moral evil can exist within the mental framework of moral relativism, well then obviously a relativist complaint about the problem of moral evil is useless. So the relativist either has to give up the complaint about the problem of moral evil to keep relativism, or give up relativism to keep the complaint about the problem of moral evil. The relativist can't have both. I'm Carlo Broussard with a ready reason for Catholic Answers, Catholic.com.
The wisdom of Mother Angelica.
The devil will always do his best to tempt you into sin until you get to that place where you love sin. That's what he wants. He wants you down there with him. And not because he loves you, he hates you. When you do what the enemy tempts you to do, he does it out of pure hatred.
EWTN. Live truth. Live Catholic.
Catholic Answers Live, open forum. Jimmy Akin, our guest. Jimmy is senior apologist here at Catholic Answers and the author of many things, including his latest book, Teaching with Authority.
The latest published one.
You didn't make me laugh right when I'm trying to introduce you and share your book title. Or you didn't know I was going to laugh?
I didn't know you were going to laugh.
Okay, all right. Our number, of course, 888-318-7884.
I do have two more recent books, though, that are in the press right now.
Okay.
So I did 20 Answers New Testament.
I remember that. Yep.
And I also just turned in 20 Answers Protestantism.
Oh, great. That seems so odd that we don't have, those...
Well... Now we do.
Like, those seem very...
Took me about a week of writing time to do each one. So
wow. Yeah. Wow. That's
less than that for New Testament, but
I know, because that's really right in your wheelhouse.
That was really right in my wheelhouse. With Protestantism, it's like, okay, I know all this stuff, but I want to go check all my, because when you're dealing with dozens of different viewpoints, you want to make sure you're saying them exactly right, and not misrepresenting what anyone is saying.
Right. Let's go to Bruno in Vancouver, Canada, watching on YouTube Live. Thanks for the call, Bruno. Your question for Jimmy.
Hi, Jimmy. Good afternoon.
Likewise.
So my question in a nutshell is this. I was raised Catholic, did First Communion, but never did my confirmation. And when I was a kid, I decided to be an idiot atheist for 20 years. I moved to Canada. My wife decided to go to a Protestant church. And at first I was like, okay, nonsense. Okay, makes sense. And then towards faith again. My question is, will I go to hell if I continue going to the Protestant church? Or no, I still have salvation, or I have to go back to Catholic church?
Okay, Bruno.
There's no way to answer this question in a single yes or no, yes, you're going to heaven, or no, you're not going to heaven way, because it depends on additional factors. The fundamental thing it depends on is, are you in a state of grace? Are you in God's friendship when you die? And there are Catholics who are in a state of grace when they die and go to heaven. There are Catholics who are not in a state of grace when they die and don't go to heaven. There are Protestants who are in a state of grace when they die and go to heaven. There are Protestants who are not in a state of grace when they die and they don't go to heaven. So the fundamental thing is, are you in a state of grace? Are you dying in God's friendship? And for that to happen, for you to die in a state of grace, you need to have repented, you need to have faith in Christ, you need to be baptized, and you need to not commit mortal sin. Mortal sin is a sin that you know is gravely contrary to God's will, and even though you know that, you say, I don't care, I'm just doing my own thing, and I'm okay with that. Even I know God really, really, really wants me to do this other thing. I just don't care. I'm doing my own thing. That's a mortal sin. Now, what does church membership have to do with mortal sin? Well, Jesus in Matthew 16:18 says, I will build my church, singular, not plural, not my churches. And that tells us that Jesus has a church that that is one church, one single body of his followers that constitute his church, in contrast to other churches that aren't his, and other assemblies, ecclesia, that aren't his. And so what else do we know about this church? Well, it's founded on Peter, and he says the gates of hell will not prevail against it, so it's not going to pass out of existence. It's not going to die. It's not going to be overcome by the powers of death. And so that means that Jesus has a church with identifiable leadership, like Peter, which has existed since the first century. And the Catholic Church fits that description. But if Jesus then says, this is my church, we can infer from that he wants us to be part of it. And to knowingly separate oneself from Jesus's church and say, I don't care, Jesus set up this church, I don't want to be a member of it, I'm just not going to do that. Well, to do that knowingly and deliberately could be a mortal sin, and it could impair one's salvation as a result. Now, not everybody who is separated from the Catholic Church has committed a mortal sin. Lots of people, you know, they're raised in the Protestant Church, and they never consciously separated from it. They would, if you said, hey, did you know the Catholic Church is Jesus' church? They would say, oh, no, it's not. And they've never seen the evidence. They've never thought about the evidence that would lead them to the conclusion that it is. And so they're innocently unaware of this. And so they're not, by not being Catholic, they're not knowingly and deliberately rejecting membership in Jesus' church. Other people, they may have been raised Catholic, but they weren't given a good Catholic upbringing. They weren't given a background in the Catholic faith. They then encountered other, and this may be your situation, Bruno, I don't know, I can't judge your heart, but they then encountered Christians of another stripe and who said things that seemed reasonable to them. And so it's not like they said, oh, I know the Catholic Church is Jesus' church and I just don't care. Well, you know, that might not be a mortal sin. On the other hand, people can be pretty good about rationalizing things too. Even when something is a grave sin and they know it on some level, they can talk themselves into, oh, this affair isn't actually really wrong because my spouse doesn't really love me, or I just need to scratch this itch once in a while or something. I still love my spouse. And they'll rationalize stuff. Yeah. And that can happen on any sin, including separating from Jesus' church. So I can't tell you one way or another what the state of your heart is. That's something between you and God. I can tell you God loves you. I can tell you that God makes salvation possible for you. I can tell you that he will provide evidence for you. If you're open to studying the evidence for the Catholic faith, he'll make it available to you. That's one of my favorite promises in the Gospel of John, where Jesus says that if any man's will is to do God's will, he will find out if the teaching is true or not. God will make sure he gets the evidence he needs. So I would encourage you to be open to the faith of your upbringing and to study it and to look at the evidence. We're here to answer questions on the air for you. We have loads of resources available for you at Catholic.com, just there online for free. You can call us up off the air and ask questions if they're longer than what we can deal with here on live radio, but we're here to serve you, and God bless you for asking the question and being open enough to God's grace to ask the question. And I just want to encourage you to go forward and to trust God to lead you.
Bruno, I hope that was helpful to you. Thank you so much for that call. Let us go now to David in San Diego, listening on the Catholic Answers Live app. What? You can't just listen on the radio in San Diego? Oh,
funny that.
Isn't that funny? You'd think you'd be hi, David. Sorry. We were talking over you for a minute. Your question for Jimmy.
No. Yeah, so I have this theology topic that when people present it to me, some of my atheist friends, I just don't know how to counter it.
Okay, what is it?
So I fully understand that God does not send people to hell through our own free will. We choose to go to hell. Mm-hmm. But what I cannot wrap my head around or answer is, why would God, who is all-loving and all-knowing, create someone from the beginning knowing that, 20 to 40 years from now, this person is destined to hell?
Okay, so this is a common question, and we've got a break coming up, so we'll see how much of this question we can answer before the break. But I want you to know that I'll make sure to finish it if I'm not able to get to the whole thing. The question as asked presupposes that God has a certain kind of knowledge. It presupposes that God knows what a person would do if he created the person, and that God knows that logically prior, because it's all outside of time, but he knows that logically prior to the act of creating the person, so that if God foresees this person will choose to go to hell, he could then not create the person. So it presupposes that God has knowledge of what people will do if he creates them, and that he could therefore refrain from creating them. So the question is, does God have that kind of knowledge? Well, we know that God has certain kinds of knowledge. He has what's sometimes called, and I'm going to try to avoid technical terms as much as I can, but he knows all possible things, because he can run every permutation of everything that could happen. So he knows all possibilities. He also knows all actualities, because he can look at the world and see what's actual in it, what's real. So he definitely knows everything that's possible and everything that's actual. The question is, does he know these things that if he didn't make it actual, would he still know the outcome of free will? And that's what we'll talk about on the other side of the break.
Hang on, David. Thank you very much. It is Open Forum today on Catholic Answers Live. Jimmy Akin, our guest. Right back with more of that right after this.
A generation ago, Christian parents didn't have to worry about how to explain transgenderism to their 9-year-old children, or help their teenager deal with mockery at school for believing in traditional marriage. But today, as our culture decays, we have to know how to talk to our children about these issues. In Made This Way, How to Prepare Kids to Face Today's Tough Moral Issues, Layla Miller and Trent Horn give parents the crucial tools and techniques to form children with the understanding they need, appropriate to their age and maturity level, to meet the world's challenges. If we're not teaching our children how to understand tough moral issues, then the world will. Read Made This Way and learn how to give your kids a firm foundation on which to build a life of moral clarity and happiness. Order your copy of Made This Way today by calling 1-888-291-8000 or logging onto the shop at Catholic.com.
Love and beauty. As a little girl, Dawn Eden Goldstein knew she wanted those things, that in them, somehow, she would find God. Over the years, as a rock journalist, she moved among some of popular music's best-known artists, straining to capture that transcendent love and beauty in every note and lyric. In Sunday Will Never Be the Same, Dawn recounts her spiritual journey in beautifully wrought detail, mixing powerful accounts of trauma, healing, and epiphany with funny anecdotes from inside the music scene. It is the rare conversion story that delights as it inspires, amuses as it edifies, and ultimately lays before the reader a lived testimony to the transforming grace of Christ. Order your copy of Sunday Will Never Be the Same by calling 1-888-291-8000, visiting the shop at Catholic.com, or asking for it at a good Catholic bookstore near you.
Open Forum today on Catholic Answers Live. Jimmy Akin, our guest, and we were in the midst of a conversation with David here in San Diego, listening on the Catholic Answers app, because you can't listen on the radio here. Jimmy, you wanted to finish your...
So God has at least a couple of kinds of knowledge that all Orthodox Catholic theologians agree that he has. One is a knowledge of all possibilities. If something's possible, God knows it. Another is the knowledge of all actualities. If someone does something in history so that it's an actual event, God knows that.
Yeah.
The question, though, is would God know what someone would freely do if he created them, even if he didn't create them?
Mm-hmm.
So
I see what you mean.
It kind of falls between mere possibility and actuality. Because if, let's say, there's a hypothetical person, God never really creates him. We'll call him Psychelet, okay? And so God's thinking about Psychelet, who he could create but doesn't.
Yeah.
And he wonders, will Psychelet freely choose to die in my friendship or not?
Okay.
Well, it's possible that Psychelet could die in God's friendship like any other human being. It's possible that Psychelet could use his free will so that he doesn't die in God's friendship.
Right.
And so both of those are possibilities. God knows that.
Okay.
But since God doesn't actually make Psychelet, there's no actual event in world history where Psychelet dies in God's friendship or not. So God doesn't know, does Psy actually do that? So there would need for God to be able to say, I'm going to not create Psychelet because he would if I create him, he will freely choose not to die in my friendship. God would have to have some kind of knowledge that kind of falls part way between his knowledge of the actual and his knowledge of the possible. And so theologians call that middle knowledge.
Okay.
And many theologians think God has middle knowledge. And if God has middle knowledge, then God would be confronted with this dilemma. Do I create someone who I know is going to reject my grace in the end? And so let's suppose for a minute God has middle knowledge. How could we square this with his goodness, with his fundamental goodness? Well, one way that people have tried to do it is by saying God's still being fair with those people. He's not doing anything cruel to them. He gave them the chance to be saved, and they freely chose to reject it. So he's being square with them.
Yeah.
And in addition, some people have said, it looks like he's actually being kind to them because it's better to exist, even in a state where you're separated from God and experiencing the consequences of that. Still better to exist than not to exist. Mm-hmm. And so, we may not should think of hell as being a net negative for people. It may be a net positive. Is it going to involve some suffering? Sure. But so does this life, and this life is still a net positive. Maybe hell is the same way. And so in that case, God would actually be kind to someone by creating them and giving them free will, and even if they end up going to hell, it's still a net positive for them. So they're still coming out on the plus side, and that would square with God's goodness. So those are a couple of things you could explore as a way of saying, okay, God has middle knowledge, and that's how we explain this. But it's not church teaching.
Yeah.
God has middle knowledge. It is a theological opinion that God has middle knowledge.
Okay.
And so consequently, there are other theologians, and this would include people like St. Thomas Aquinas, who would say, no, God doesn't have knowledge of what someone would choose if he made them, but he never made them.
Yeah.
Because that requires free will. And just like God can't know the shape of a four-sided triangle, that's just gibberish.
Yeah.
Because triangles, by definition, have three sides, not four.
So he can't know the choice a chooser would make without making the chooser.
Well, he can't know. I would put it like this: he can't to talk about the result of a choice that is freely never made, or the result of a free will choice that is never made, is in the same category as a four-sided triangle.
Got it.
You have to have an actual choice to have an actual outcome, would be the argument. And so consequently, if God doesn't have middle knowledge, then he doesn't have the option of not creating somebody. Based on what he foresees they're going to do, because he has to create them to see what they're going to do. And so he knows, sure, if I create Psych-Helot, he could die in my friendship or he could reject my friendship. But without you having a free will to choose that, there's no outcome of a choice. And so God then has to say, okay, let there be Psych-Helot, at which point he sees you in history making the choice one way or another. But at that point, you exist. So he can't uncreate you after you exist in history, because at that point, you're real.
David, thank you very, very much for that question. I hope that was helpful to you. I feel like I have a vested interest in this hypothetical character called Psych-Helot that you invented.
Yeah.
I'm really hoping that this particular character will die in friendship with
There
God.
are some serious issues here, yeah.
So I suppose that person could just continue to have faith and receive the sacraments. That might be
that would be a good start.
Maybe try to live charitably.
Avoid mortal sin.
Okay, all right. Okay, well, we just want him to have hope. That's the thing. Thanks, David. Let's go to Ryan in Washington. Ryan, your question for Jimmy Akin.
Hi, Jimmy.
Howdy.
Hi. My question involves, usually my family here, it starts off with me knowing that, as being a Catholic, we are supposed to balance faith and find balance between faith and reason.
Okay. Ryan, it's a little hard to understand you. Can you please talk directly into your phone?
Sure.
Thank you.
As a Catholic, it's our job to always balance faith and reason and apply that throughout our lives. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. And what I mean by that is, we follow God's laws, we hold strong to our faith, but we also acknowledge the consensus of scientific discoveries and observations. But my biggest problem here is that I have parents who are very good, strong, devout Catholics. However, they ignore the consensus of science, like, for instance, climate change and the issues concerning it and many other things.
Okay.
And they tend to just blatantly shove aside the facts made by science and so forth and other things that were objective studies and empirical proof.
Mm-hmm.
And they'll hold steadfast to they take more of a fundamentalist approach rather than a faith and reason approach to life. And I've tried to show them that, and I've tried to explain to them that taking an approach that acknowledges both science and faith is perfectly compatible with our faith, our belief system. But they continue to deny this fact, and it's sort of like they continue to deny it and deny it and deny it.
Okay.
And there's no way of making them see this.
So, Ryan, I need to ask you for clarification on something. When you say they deny this fact, are you saying they are denying the fact that Catholics should take science seriously, or are you saying they're denying global warming?
Well, that's just an example.
Okay, but if you say to them, Catholics should take science seriously and shouldn't automatically reject it, what do they say to that more general claim without going to specific examples? Would they say, yeah, Catholics should take it seriously, or would they say, oh no, Catholics shouldn't take science seriously? What would their attitude be?
Well, it's pretty complex. There's no yes or no answer there, but it's a little mixed.
Okay.
And what I mean by that is, they'll say no, this can't, because they buy into usually the more religious right-leaning.
Okay. Again, you said this. What do you mean this? Is that global warming again, or is that something else?
Well, generally, scientific studies, whether it's hard science that entails global warming, or social science considering politics in society, regardless of it, they seem to side with the more evangelical Christian way of thinking and take a strong, more hard-by-the-book fundamentalist approach.
Okay.
Sort of like a strong, ultra-conservative approach to everything, whereas, the average Catholics should try to stay in the middle and be very careful. But, my parents tend to be, very ultra-conservative, and I just hear them talk about this stuff over and over again. Mm-hmm. And even though there have been objective studies proving,
proving what?
Certain things about the earth, the climate, and social changes that, for instance, the conservative media tends to deny.
Ryan, what would be an example of something in the social area that you think science has proven that your parents have a problem with? I need an extra example there.
Well, let's take illegal immigration, for instance.
Okay.
People on the Republican side, by the way, I am not a liberal person. I'm a very traditional thinking Catholic, but I take an independent approach. So back to the subject, I'm saying, illegal immigration, for instance, my parents strongly believe
Go ahead.
immigration causes crime, whereas empirical evidence from countless social scientists and studies have shown that that is far from the truth. In fact, it may even cause crime to stagnate and decline, for instance.
So let me make sure I understand your claim. We are talking about not immigration, but illegal immigration, right?
Correct.
Okay. So you're saying illegal immigration does not result in a net increase in crime of any form. Is that it? Or is it a more specific form? Well, I would say, I suspect you may mean something more specific than that, because it seems to me if someone is doing something illegal, that by definition means an increase in crime. If of some kind. It may not be violent crime, it may not be sexual crime, it may not be financial crime, or it may be. But I think we have to be careful about our terms here. Let me take a step back and talk about the science issue. So science is a fascinating field of endeavor. It's something I personally am a big fan of. I spend loads of my free time reading science books about all kinds of different subjects: physics, astronomy, cosmology, biology, geology, economics, mathematics. I love science. It's one of my big things. And one of my regular themes, both here on Catholic Answers Live and on my own podcast, Jimmy Akin's Mysterious World, is how to reconcile faith and reason, how to take both perspectives very seriously. So I'm on your side, Ryan, in that I think Catholics need to take science quite seriously, and they need to be open to the findings of science. They need to not automatically dismiss something that science has suggested because it's something that doesn't fit comfortably with their prior views. I think they need to be open to revising prior understandings of particular things in light of science. Having said that, I also, and in part precisely because I study science and its history, I know the results of science are always provisional. And there have been major shifts in scientific understandings of how the world works over the course of time. And there is no particular reason to think we're at the end of those shifts. Now, hopefully, and this is more a matter of faith than a matter of anything else, hopefully we have an approximate understanding of the world that is better than prior understandings, and hopefully we won't see massive reinterpretations in the future of our understanding of things. Hopefully we're pretty much in the ballpark scientifically, but any true scientist will say there's no way of knowing that. We could find evidence tomorrow that would completely revolutionize our understanding of something. It's like back in the 1990s when we discovered dark energy. Scientists, the debate had been, is the universe heavy enough, is it massive enough to eventually slow the expansion of the universe caused by the Big Bang so that it will eventually recollapse on itself? Well, lo and behold, in the 1990s, we discovered not only is it not massive enough to close the expansion of the Big Bang, it's actually flying apart faster and faster. It's accelerating. And so there has to be some unknown force, call it dark energy, driving that expansion. And this was totally shocking when it was discovered in the 90s. So we have no guarantee that there aren't future shocks like that just around the corner in the history of science. I also know that scientists are not always unbiased. Scientists can have biases that show through in their work. This is something we also see in the history of science. In Nazi Germany, there was so-called German science. In Soviet Russia, there was Soviet science, where you had particular ideologies of a scientific nature that caught on and that then became dominant in those places, and they ended up being undermined. Here in the West, we're subject to the same thing. To cite just one example, the USDA food pyramid. that you used to see on all kinds of products. Well, that was received nutrition science by loads of people. But you know who came up with the nutrition pyramid? The USDA, not the Centers for Disease Control, not the National Institutes for Health. It was the United States Department of Agriculture, whose interest is in dealing with the farm industry, not nutrition and what's best for people medically. And nevertheless, they had a big enough megaphone that they convinced lots of people that you should be eating all these carbohydrates and very little protein and fat, and that's not going to be healthy for everybody. So you have these same fads and fashions in science here in the West. If you, and like one of the daily sites I check on my on the internet is Real Clear Science, where they have a representative sampling of science stories from around the world. One of the things that's always popping up on Real Clear Science is the replication crisis in the social sciences and in psychology. It turns out all of these pivotal, seminal psychology experiments that have been done and social science things cannot be duplicated. When people have tried to go and replicate the results and it turns out they can't be replicated, scientists are openly talking about a crisis in these areas because things they've taken for granted for so many decades suddenly can't be replicated, and it's thrown the whole area into an uproar. So I would say that when we're dealing, and frankly, when it comes to global warming, I'm open to the idea that the environment is warming up on average. I'm even open to the idea that humans are causing it, but I'm also skeptical of that because I see evidence in this area of the science being cooked. There was the Hide the Decline scandal a few years ago, where it turns out the fundamental data that a lot of these claims rested on could not be reproduced because it had been manipulated by the people who were keeping the spreadsheets. And specifically in their emails, they were talking about, we need to do this because we need to hide the decline in the recent temperature data. And so that's something that I'm open, but I'm skeptical. When you talk about immigration, you're going to have to be much more specific about what kinds of crimes are we talking about, because illegally crossing a border is a crime. But if you want to say, well, there's no increase in violent crime, maybe, maybe not. I'd have to see the data. That's an empirical question. I don't know. So I would say that I would try to, in terms of dealing with your parents, my primary concern would be, are they right with God? If they're living lives of grace and faith and they're trying to follow God, the scientific issues are subsidiary because scientific knowledge is always provisional. It's wonderful to have. It's wonderful to know more about God's creation and to understand it even better and to use the gift of reason to explore it and admire its wonder. But scientific knowledge is always provisional. What's eternal is our knowledge of God and the faith, and that's what's most important in life. So I would say if your parents are living lives of faith, I would rejoice in that fact. I would look at these other issues and say, hey, maybe we can talk about these, but I wouldn't assume that just because something is popular in the science press right now, that it's necessarily true. Scientists will always say this is all provisional. We could have major surprises around the corner. And so I wouldn't get too worked up if your parents don't buy some of the latest scientific ideas. You may think, oh, well, they should. There's really good evidence on this. But as long as they're living with God, that's what's most important.
Ryan, thank you very, very much. We got to take a quick break. Be right back with more right after this on Catholic Answers Live.
Hang on. Catholic Answers Live will return in a moment.
Catholic Answers Live is proudly supported by CatholicChemistry.com, a new dating site for Catholics who want to do dating right and believe relationships start with Catholic chemistry. Catholic Answers Live thanks CatholicChemistry.com for their generous support on the web at CatholicChemistry.com.
A lot of people think that street evangelization involves yelling out of a bullhorn telling people that they're going to hell. Not so with St. Paul's Street Evangelization. Our methods are non-confrontational and effective. We simply offer information on the Catholic faith along with rosaries, miraculous medals, and prayer. Pope Francis wrote about how beautiful it is to see street preachers joyfully bringing Jesus to every corner of the earth. Street evangelization is fun and fruitful. Join us today at streetevangelization.com.
EWTN, communicating the faith.
Fallen away Catholic years and years ago, doing my own thing, and my mom and dad never gave up on me, and I know it was the Holy Rosary, and they kept after me. Philip, pray your rosary, and eventually I did. I'm a member of the Knights of the Immaculata, Maximilian Kolbe's group. I'm with the Legion of Mary, and I haven't stopped leading the rosary in nursing homes, thanks be to God.
EWTN. Live truth. Live Catholic.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. Annual spring store-wide sale still underway. Everything's 15% off. When you go to the Catholic Answers shop, that's shop.catholic.com, just use the promo code SPRING19, get 15% off your whole order. Let's go to Matthew in Abingdon, Virginia. Is that correct, Matt?
Abingdon, yeah.
Abingdon, that's okay. All right.
Famous Protestant publishing house there.
I was not even aware. Mm-hmm. Is it named after the town, or is it something?
Well, it's named Abingdon.
Oh, Abington Press.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. All right. Matthew, your question for Jimmy.
Yes. Hi, Jimmy inside. Thank you, gentlemen, for taking my call this evening.
Sure thing.
My question is, I was curious, how as Catholics should we view the Crusades? I guess more specifically, how we could also look at the Knights Templar Order. I know that's garnered quite a bit of attention with the new series that's now on the History Channel, Nightfall. And if, in addition to that, could you offer any sources that I might look at? I've tried to do some research, and there's plenty of materials out there on the Crusades, but I've been trying to find something that looks at the Crusades and handles that subject fairly from a Catholic perspective.
So it's very difficult to offer an overall assessment of the Crusades as a body because each crusade was different. The Crusades occurred over a number of centuries, and they had markedly different results. I mean, the First Crusade liberated territory in the Holy Land that then became a Western-style kingdom that made the Holy Land safe for Christians, lasted for, a good period of time. Other crusades really went off the rails, like one of the later crusades. The Crusaders got as far as Constantinople, which they then proceeded to sack, even though it was a Christian city. And this has been a huge wound on the memory of the church that has caused problems dividing East and West. It's really not, great to go in and sack the Christian leadership city in Eastern Christendom of Constantinople. So some of the Crusades, you can look at them and say, okay, they were trying to protect Christians who were being denied access to these territories that are holy sites. They were trying to, secure access to the holy sites for Christians. That's a legitimate goal to have. Maybe they used appropriate means, maybe they didn't. You can argue about that, but at least the goal was appropriate. But then you look at these other things where you're attacking fellow Christians, and it's just not a good scene. So I can't really offer a Crusades yes, Crusades no answer. It has to be looked at with more refinement. And even during the course of the Crusades that you could look at and say, okay, there's something redeeming here, there's something good. They were still done by sinners. And the thing about sinners is sinners be sinning. So there were mistakes made even in the good Crusades, so to speak. In terms of the Knights Templar, I'm afraid, I know some of the basics about the Knights Templar, but I'm not an expert in them. I couldn't really offer a rigorous assessment of them. One of the things that the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith, and it was headed at the time by Joseph Ratzinger, in the document Memory and Reconciliation, which was produced shortly before the year 2000, one of the things they pointed out is it's very difficult to apply the standards of one period to complex historical phenomena occurring in a different age that were subject to factors that we have now lost track of. Because it's very easy to oversimplify our vision of things in the past and forget things, or some knowledge has just been lost to history that would have been important back then for decision making that we can't retrieve now. So it's hard to make judgments about the past in general, and that certainly includes complex phenomena like the Crusades and so forth. I would say if you're looking for resources, I'd read both sides. I'd read people who are saying the Crusades are a bad thing. I would read people who are saying the Crusades were a good thing. And I would expect to use critical thinking and try to sort the good from the bad in both sets of literature. I know one book, now I haven't read this myself, but based on, it's a book that Catholic Answers publishes. Unfortunately, I don't have time to read everything we publish because I'm researching for my own writings. But one book that Catholic Answers has published is called The Glory of the Crusades. I'm guessing based on the title, it's an on-balance positive view of them. But I would also expect it to have some critical appraisal in it. So you might want to get a copy of that. There are also histories of the church. I know a recent one that Chris Check thinks very highly of is called Timeless by Steve Weidenkopf. You might want to check that out. There are other books as well. I'd go on Amazon and look for books about the Crusades that are critical and read some of that material too, because you don't want to be in an intellectual bubble where you're just hearing one side of things.
Thank you, Matthew, very, very much for that call. Thanks to everybody who called. And thank you to you, Jimmy Akin.
Thank you, Cy Kellett.
Really fun hour.
I'm so glad you exist.
I feel similarly.
You make
Jimmy.
the universe a better place.
I appreciate you saying that. Now I feel inspired to try even harder.
Oh, good.
I appreciate that. Jimmy's, you can we talked a little bit about Hitler's religion. You can find out all about that at Jimmy's podcast, Jimmy Akin's Mysterious World, as well as find out about a whole bunch of other cool stuff. Hey, tomorrow we're going to be with EWTN up in LA, in Anaheim at the LA Religious Ed Congress. If you see us there, come by and say hello, would you? We'd love to see you. And we'll join you on air from there tomorrow.